Ladies and gentlemen, people of all ages and identities, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the first race week of 2026. My name is Ruby Rose Price. Welcome to the Grid Talk podcast, and today we're here with our preview of 2026 Australian Grand Prix. Joining me today, we have Tom Horrox
Hello.
and Owain Medford.
Hello.
How are you both? Are you looking forward to the season starting, Tom?
I actually am. I really am looking forward to it. I know it's been the shortest off season we've had ever, but it still feels like it's been a long time. So I think all the doom merchants declaring the death of Formula One are going to be pleasantly disappointed because I think we're going to be in for a cracking season. I think the first few races will be something to get used to, and remember, everyone, the first 3, 4 races will probably be the worst it will be. So let's not make sweeping judgments based on the first few races. Let's just enjoy the ride and see what happens and enjoy something different happening.
Absolutely. And of course, to put that asterisk out there, we have only seen testing at the time of recording. So we truly don't know for certain where everyone is until, we hit the lights out in Sunday for the race. And of course, as well, there has obviously been that element of like doom and gloom that people seem to think Formula One's going to fail with this new set of regulations. And I echo exactly what I've just said. We don't know what's going to happen until we've seen a couple of races. And, F1 might make some changes. We've seen them do that before. But at the very least, it's got to go better than when they introduced elimination style qualifying back in, I think, 2014 or 15. But yeah, Owain, we are, of course, back at Albert Park in Melbourne, Australia for the season opener. What does that mean for you, like Australia being the opener? Any particular memories?
It just feels right, to be honest with you. Obviously, we've had that from last year, and we did. There was a period of time when we didn't have that. But yeah, no, harking back, it seems exactly the right place to start. Just to throw everyone off a little bit. It's a track that's very, very clearly different from numerous others. You can't necessarily judge what's going to happen. If I had to sort of pick any memories, I'd sort of pick out maybe Jenson Button with that 2010 win. Switching to the wets at the right, to the dry tires at the right time and everything like that. It's kind of sort of where you can make those big gains on people and sort of lay down the gauntlet. And we usually find that it just throws up some really odd sort of situations as a result of that. I think that's my overriding sort of memory. I mean, we're obviously you think it's Australia, so it's going to be hot all the time, and that's really sort of not something that tends to happen. We tend to have actually quite temperate weather, usually throwing in some rain into the mix. And it's usually quite unpredictable. You tend to find that the sort of driver who's been successful in the past has an absolutely torrid time. Otherwise, afterwards, sort of either winning the first race and then having winning the race the year before and DNFing or something like that. It's just a really odd situation to be in. So I think that's Australia in a nutshell, really. It's kind of a little bit of an outlier that just keeps the intrigue going further into the season.
Yeah, and I think that's where we want a first race of the season. You don't want it to always just be the case of, so this is how the entire season's going to go, which I always felt like we had when it came to doing Bahrain as the first race of the season, because of course you've just had F1 testing there. The teams and drivers have so much data gathered on it, and then you cut away to Australia as the opening race of the season instead. And you've got, as you say, it is temperate weather there, but there can be like the threat of weather and like the fact that it might not necessarily be, to the expectations of what the teams are expecting. But at the same time, I just think it's a great circuit to go to. And Tom, how about any memories for you or any thoughts and feelings about Australia?
Well, as I won't say, it just feels right. I've got great memories from getting up at the crack of dawn to watch this race, and also watching the finale in Japan as well from those Mika Hakkinen World Championships and that kind of thing. But going back to the first race, it just always seems great. I remember one very, very heavy night watching the first few laps of, I think it was 2014, and a taxi on the way home, and then I think I'd got in just at the point when Lewis Hamilton broke down. So yeah, it's just such a great place to start the season. It's only a shame that, like, from our perspective, it's not in at prime time, but I would watch every race if it was 4 in the morning. That's actually my preferred start time, because then I can watch the race, watch the reaction, and then still enjoy the rest of the day and not feel guilty about wasting my Sunday. So it's just great. I think Bahrain is a great place to start as well when it comes to the races. They're great races, but it's definitely the best place to be Australia for the openers. Yeah, I mean, apart from the race in 2012 when I was there, picked that up off the floor. I think yeah, to be fair, that probably was my favourite Australian Grand Prix because it was a Jenson Button win, so that was a great one to watch. But David Coulthard winning as well in '97, I think was a great one as well. Really enjoyed those two.
Yeah, you can never complain about a Jenson Button victory, can you? You know, like he is one of the most lovable F1 drivers we ever had on the grid, and I think that might just be a little bit of British bias. Just we'll get that in there to start off the season, but JB absolutely, like always bringing the good vibes. But yeah, let's start actually doing some. I don't know if prediction is the word, but previewing. And we'll take a look at the front runner expectations. So. Owain, like, who are you expecting really to start this season off very strongly in Australia?
I mean, just based off testing, I know that there's not a huge amount that you can take from testing alone. Obviously, fuel loads are unknown. Every team is sort of trying to hide something or gain something from a marketing perspective. And so, to a degree, everything that you see in testing is all a bit of a performance anyway. Obviously, the teams do have to kind of go through their run plan, and you can kind of take something from the one thing that makes it's very hard to hide, which is your testing mileage, and your the body language and how happy everyone seems in the car, in the teams, in the garage, in the car, from the sort of very early on and kind of throughout the test. We kind of saw that from Mercedes, we saw it from Ferrari. McLaren seem to have not taken a step back, but have been overtaken really. And I think it's no surprise that it's come from two teams. The two teams that overtaken them, Mercedes and Ferrari, were the ones that weren't in the championship battle up until the end of last year. I mean, we do see that very often. For example, back in 2009 with Ferrari and McLaren, and it does seem that that's happened kind of again. But the thing that you've got to say is that out of the teams, I haven't mentioned the sort of elephant in the room there of the top of the front runners, which is Red Bull. And what, from what I have seen in testing, I was leading the charge on saying there's no way they'll be able to get that power unit ready. It doesn't matter how much expertise Ford is giving Red Bull powertrains, they'll never be able to get something together. And it does seem that as much as maybe they're not kind of on the level of McLaren, who do seem to be in third, Red Bull seem to have done a really good job on the power unit, and they seem remarkably reliable. And that's that's kind of a massive juxtaposition for their former engine partner. So to do that from not even having a spade in the ground even 10 years ago, let alone 5 or 6, they have done an outstanding job. When it comes to the two teams I alluded to, Mercedes and Ferrari, who weren't quite on the pace by the end of the 2022 rule set, there seems to be a bit of confidence in Ferrari, at least. The fact that they're bringing out such innovative solutions, it seems like Maranello's got its mojo back in that way, and finding loopholes that other people just haven't thought of, that so far as we've seen. I don't know whether I'm just sort of drinking the Kool-Aid here, but I think Ferrari might be back. They might have just had the reinvigoration they needed. And Mercedes, if they're not second, they're ahead by just a smidge. But it's really tight at the front, it looks like, just based off sort of mileage and happiness with the tests alone. So those are your 4 front runners, and it looks like it's going to be a pretty close battle.
Yeah, I mean, Owain definitely drinking some Ferrari Kool-Aid there a little bit, but that's what the Scuderia's, Tifosi's hopes and dreams, like, that's what their entire fan base is built off, and as Tom will routinely attest to, Ferrari have a legacy that they have, dined out on from not a lot of actual success in their years, but a lot of brand stopping power. But does he also think that Ferrari are one of the top contenders? Like, obviously Mercedes look strong and reliable, but Ferrari do look confident, Tom.
Yes, they do. And I hasten to say I don't know if they are back, but they are certainly in the fight. As Fernando once accurately said, now we can fight, and then never got another podium. But there we go. Moving on. No, I do think that they are definitely going to be in the fight. I think they're bringing loads of new stuff at the start of the season. They really are going all out to try and start the season running and start it strong. I think Mercedes will be starting it very strong. And obviously, I think Red Bull have done a fantastic job. I think I'm really interested to see how McLaren's approach pans out because they did switch to development very early, given how strong that their car was last year. And what they are doing is they've started with a very neutral car that can go in lots of different directions, but they've saved all their upgrades. Like they haven't what apart from their first iteration, they haven't brought anything new to testing like everyone else did. They're not bringing anything to Melbourne. So they are going to be, I think, fourth. Like probably not a distant fourth, but a solid fourth in Australia. But they've not spent any of their upgrade budget at all, and they're waiting to see what things happen. They'll now know where the land lies. But I know Ferrari are bringing upgrades to Australia. Lots of other teams are bringing upgrades to Australia. So as a result, they're then going to see the direction that everyone else is going, and they're going to have more headroom to develop into the season. So it's going to be interesting to see, like if they stay in the fight, if they're able to, be reliable, which hopefully that for their case their Mercedes engine is. Be reliable, be quick, be there, getting podiums, getting the odd win when circumstances are available to them. They've got two great drivers there, and then come the end of the season, they're probably going to be the quickest car. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out for them. I think it's going to be Mercedes will be leading the way. I think Ferrari and Red Bull will be fighting it out for second, and then so McLaren in that fourth place there. I think Red Bull, in Max Verstappen's hands at least, will be a match for Ferrari and probably Mercedes as well. So that's going to play out in a way we very much expect Max Verstappen to do. So yeah, that's the way my top four lies at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And it is certainly true. You can never write out Max Verstappen, particularly when armed with a Red Bull that did a lot last season after parting ways with Christian Horner to turn that team around to just within 2 points of the driver's title. I was counting him down and out in that particular thing. Max was counting himself down and out, but if Red Bull show up with the same sort of like upwards trajectory that they had towards the end of the season, they are definitely contenders. But yeah, Mercedes just put in like a shift and a half during preseason testing. Ferrari do obviously look like they've got something, but it's Ferrari. It could go either way. And yeah, until we hit those checkered flags in Australia, we do not know how this is really going to go. But in terms of best of the rest, then, leading the midfield surely has to be, Haas and, dare I say, Alpine, Owain?
Yeah, Alpine kind of surprise. Surprise of the test. They're coming up with innovative solutions. They've got, rather than going for a standard sort of DRS style active aero rear wing, they seem to have gone for a rear wing with the hinge point on the front of the two movable elements, sort of laying down, which I think is slightly lower drag, but has a sort of reduced reattachment time, or it's possibly the other way around. This is the kind of minutiae that we're getting into. I mean, obviously, a big thing for Alpine is that they clearly decided a long time ago that they could not get back to the front with their power unit developed in house, and they've chosen to go with Mercedes, and I think that looks like it's paid dividends for them. They haven't seemed to have so many of the issues that have plagued them in past pre-season testing. Sorry, even with the sort of mature rule set of the last engines and the last cars. So that's a huge step forward for them, just in terms of being able to fight. Just moving up halfway up the grid for them is probably going to be heady territory for them. They might get altitude sickness from that. And then you've got Haas, who I would say really impressed with just how many laps they were putting down. It's given it's a brand new engine formula. I know there's been a lot of changes, and it is quite similar in certain places to the previous rule set, but still to just have so many laps put down from that Ferrari power unit says a lot about where how prepared they are. I wouldn't like to guess where those teams have shaken out between the two. I'd probably give it to Haas if I had to give anything, but I still think that, I mean, it's a bit disparaging how we've had it in the notes that it's Isaac Hadjar is going to be in the midfield. I think initially he might be a bit closer than maybe we're giving him credit for, but it just seems that I can't imagine him being that far back basically. And then we obviously have the Racing Bulls, who again they've got a decent power unit it seems, and I think that Robert Lindblad remains to be seen in Formula One, but I think he's going to do a great job just throughout this season. So I think that this midfield fight, we've got these two tranches. We've got the we've got the fight at the front, and then we've got this midfield fight of another 4 teams, and I think we're going to have a great time with them.
Yeah, it certainly does look like a bit of a spicy midfield potential. And, as you rightfully say, it is a bit difficult to necessarily put teams in the right order, but it does feel a little bit like Racing Bulls are a little bit behind those other two of Haas and Alpine, just because it looks like, obviously, previously there has been the metaphor of the Racing Bulls like being the Red Bull, but with the sensitivity turned down. It looks like they might have turned that sensitivity up to continue that metaphor, because it does look a little bit unstable at times.
It does, yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how Lawson handles that, and obviously Lindblad coming in as a rookie into that situation. But again, brand new rule set. They're going to be making changes all the time. The last season would have been probably the least they did to the cars of any season in recent years. So it was very much a stable platform for the whole year. But there's going to be constant changes to that car. Every car is going to feel a lot different, apart from maybe one team that's hardly been on track. There's going to be a lot of changes. So I think they'll sort it out, and that's exactly what that team needs to be. They need to, because with the type of drivers that they do have, they need to have a car that is going to be of a stable foundation where the drivers can push. And let's be honest, they need that car. Red Bull need that car to be a test bed for all their different engine modes that they want to test out. So I think we'll probably see more engine failures on that side as well. They have to give them the same engine, but doesn't mean they have to keep the same engine modes. They can certainly trial out engine modes and see how long they last. So I think we're probably going to see some engine blow-ups from that team. Because let's be honest, all the other customer teams have got competitive reasons to be on the grid. They don't. Their sole purpose is to be the junior team to Red Bull. So I'm not saying it's against the rules. I'm just saying that's how it's going to be. Let's be honest. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting actually, to be honest, because with that, if that engine is strong, that power unit is strong, I think we could potentially see Lindblad's more Lawson than Lindblad actually fighting in there with Isaac Hadjar, because I do think he has been struggling a bit with that Red Bull in testing so far. Max Verstappen has clearly been the driver who looks like he's more at home with that car, which is what we expected, to be honest. So that's definitely going to be interesting. I do think they are a little bit behind the two you mentioned before, Alpine and Haas. But that's fine for that team. That's kind of, I think Alpine and Haas have both done good jobs. Haas have obviously got a very strong Mercedes power unit in there, and they've put a lot into that car. They won't develop that car as much as anyone else. I know they've got Toyota backing now, so they've got a bit more money in there, but they're still, you can't just create that knowledge out of nowhere. So I think Alpine's certainly looking strong. Haas looking to make a good start, and Racing Bulls are at least in the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you can have a 5-star midfield, because they wouldn't be part of the midfield, but it does look like a decent midfield. And if you think this is at least a decent podcast, or, may I dare suggest a 5-star podcast, would love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify, or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're listening on YouTube or whatever, give us that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, well, make sure you subscribe as well, because it really does help us out as a channel. And yeah, we'll move from the midfield to the teams towards the back. And Owain, when Audi were announced at joining the grid, did you think we'd be discussing them as potential, back markers?
I mean, no, but that's because I'm really biased. No, I think there's a lot to be said for Audi. Like, I think that they, you'd expect that, given the expertise that they do have, various different things. So, back in the day of I'm going to shoehorn it in, back in the days of their dying days of endurance racing, they were working on using a fuel which is apparently very similar to the sort of sustainable fuels that we are using now. And given that sort of, Audi don't forget how to build engines. It's kind of their primary thing, let alone hybrid systems, which they're also pretty good at and have longer in the game than a number of other people. That, there's an element there of thinking that you'd just be able to marry the Sauber to the, the Sauber aerodynamics to the Audi power unit, and things would be off to the races. as we know, that doesn't often work. And we've seen before that the trials and tribulations of having to regenerate, for example, off the rear wheels only, are a big sort of challenge. And I think there's a lot of things that a lot of the power unit manufacturers didn't really think about. And that's not just talking about the ones that are at the back of the grid, like seemingly Audi. They didn't have the worst testing known to man, but they obviously didn't have the worst. But they do seem to be at least doing a decent job on the aero side, and they've had things that are quite radical in terms of the way that they've set things up. So I don't think they're at the back of the grid by any means. But the weakest point may well be getting that power unit where they need it to be. And, just thinking about the small little things like turbo size that apparently no one apart from Ferrari may have well thought of. So, from that perspective, I don't think they're as far back as you maybe would think. I think there's a lot of people who have got egg on their face from how they've gone about preseason testing and how things have gone for them. But they're certainly not as high up as I wanted them to be.
Yeah, and absolutely, it is worth mentioning, like, they at least inherit the former Sauber occupants and baseline. So, as an actual team, they do appear to have moved forwards a little bit in terms of constructor positioning, and they might be popping up in the top 10 at circuits where it suits them, as we saw Sauber doing as well. But a team that, we really didn't expect to see at this point, given they sacrificed 2025 to go all in on 2026. The start of preseason for Williams has not been the smooth operation that Carlos Sainz nor Alex Albon needed, has it?
No, it's been very disappointing. It's just that car just FW 45 is it now they're on? I think there's the number FW 45, maybe 46, might be 46 actually. It definitely needs to go on a diet. It's the same problem that we had a few years ago with the Williams. It was just underbaked but had been doing too much baking and it's well overweight. So it definitely needs to slim down. It's like it's a first iteration. It's like it's an iteration behind in like engineering terms, where it's kind of been put together and worked. But this is, guys, this is the beta version. This isn't the final car. This is going to look a lot different to this. So I think there's just a lot of stuff that still needs to happen to that car. But the trouble is when a car is just exactly the same as another car but heavier, it just hemorrhages lap time. And if rumors are true about the 30 kilos or whatever it is they're saying that it's overweight, that is going to equate to nearly a second in lap time, which is going to be, and that is just free lap time. At least when a car's heavy with fuel and it's losing that much time, the fuel burns off. Like that is not going anywhere. They're carrying that for the entire race, and that is going to put them probably not at the back of the grid, but it is going to put them behind the rest of the field, apart from, in my opinion, two cars. I think they are going to be they're going to be fighting to get out of Q1, which is horrendous for where they're supposed to be. But I'm not prepared to write them off, because that is one thing that it's free lap time. They can just keep working at that, and all it's going to take is improving processes and changing materials or changing design slightly. It's all stuff that's not going to cost a huge amount, but just needs time and research. And they'll be able to get the weight off that car. And hopefully, if they can get it towards the weight limit by the end of the season, it's going to be up there with the Alpines and the Haases. I think that's a realistic target, that maybe not beat them, but if they can be as quick or quicker than Alpine by the end of the year, then they've rescued something from the season. But they very much were supposed to be competitive now. And that's what we were promised. We all drank the Kool-Aid from James Vowles, who said, I don't care about 23, I don't care about 24, and I don't care about 25. Everything's about 26. But no, that's not been the case at all now. So, yeah, they need to do something. They need to sort it out for Carlos Sainz. They're going to lose Carlos Sainz. Alex Albon, if he has a good season, he will be definitely a pick for, say, a team like Aston Martin. If they're losing Fernando Alonso, he gives it up, and then they need someone like Albon or Sainz are going to be the people they're going to target. I don't think Sainz will take another project now. I think there'll be enough big teams that would be in for him, but they need to be careful, because they've got a great lineup here. They've promised the world. They need to deliver now. I still think Vowles is the person to do that, but they actually just need to come good on the promise now, because it's not looking great.
Yeah, it certainly is one of those scenarios of you need to turn this around and deliver on what you've promised, or like this could be a bit of a write-off for them. But at the same time, the season isn't over and done with in Australia, and teams can bounce back. We've seen it done many a time. But Owain, just to cover off the final two teams, and obviously Williams, we do think are ahead of these next two, Cadillac and Aston Martin, and we're putting Cadillac ahead of the Aston Martin because the Aston Martin does not appear to have had that good of a preseason testing at the very least, and with Adrian Newey and obviously all the hype around Honda rejoining and things like that as their own power unit supplier, we did not expect to see Aston Martin where they are at the very least. And, I think Cadillac should be happy to not just make it to the grid on Sunday, but potentially ahead of another team as well.
Yeah, I mean, Cadillac have spent an awful lot of time and effort and money getting on the Formula One grid, as you have to, just to be even remotely competitive. And if you asked 12 months ago whether the team where they were coming at it brand new, and admittedly they had a proven power unit in the Ferrari power unit while they got their own project online, were going to be able to compete with a team that has arguably the greatest F1 designer of any generation, let alone just his, more money than sense, brand new facilities, right out, sort of, from the ashes of numerous Formula One teams that have done a lot with not a lot of budget, and a power unit manufacturer who have won world championships, not just in the past, but very sort of in a contemporary setting only a couple of years ago. You would have expected Cadillac to be, the runt of the litter here. And that is just not what has happened. They have had, admittedly, not a painless preseason testing, but a pretty good one. And by comparison, I think it was, 6 laps we got from Aston Martin on the last day of testing. Fernando Alonso is probably sitting there wondering why. Why did we allow this? This is the second time. I can't wait to hear GP2 engine again. This is...
It's going to be F2 engine now, Owain?
No, I think it's bad. I think it's that bad that it's GP2 engine. We kind of came in just thinking, you know what? They've got the money. They've got the talent in one half of the garage at least. And we were kind of, expecting that Honda would be buzzing with excitement, not vibrating themselves to bits. Like I say, I don't have the full lap count in front of me, but I don't need it because I can point to the last day of testing, bearing in mind that they were late to the preseason shakedown, and just say 6 laps, 6 whole laps. I'm going to take bets now on whether the power unit is going to last longer than it did in 2015. That's a genuine question that I have. Are they going to make it to the grid?
Let us know in the comments below. But yeah, no, absolutely. Aston Martin did look in trouble in testing, and of course, either they need to fix it and they need to fix it fast, or Fernando Alonso is about to have his worst F1 season since 2015. And I cannot wait. I cannot wait to watch this unfold. But, Owain's calling for bets. Owain's calling for predictions in the chat and the description down below. Let's get on to our predictions for this Australian Grand Prix weekend, and I'll start off with you, Tom Horrox. Who is your pole position, and then give us your podium prediction as well, and we'll save the bold for just after.
Well, you can't, I know everything we said and where we think the teams are, but you can't let past Max Verstappen for pole. The guy is just a phenomenon, and I do think weirdly, I think the Red Bull powertrains power unit will be better in the race format than it will be in qualifying format. But I just feel like Max Verstappen is going to nail these regulations better than anyone else to start with. And people aren't going to expect it because he seems so disenchanted with it. But yeah, it's his job and he's damn good at his job. So I think it'll be Max Verstappen on pole. I don't think he's going to be able to win the race, though. I think potentially we could see a Ferrari leading into turn 1, which would be mega. But I do think the top 3 is going to be the bookies' favourite, George Russell, winning the race. I think Verstappen will be Verstappen and take 2nd place. And then I'm going to go for the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc in 3rd.
Interesting. Owain, how about your pole position and podium predictions?
Like I say, I'm still drinking that Kool-Aid. I just think, based on the regulations, we've moved away from ground effect. We've moved away to sort of snappier cars that do get away from you but can be saved. And, lest we forget that with, not much downforce, I think just based on the kind of experience, and he really did not like the last rule set. They did not work for him whatsoever. But I think that this is a formula that is going to reward the drivers who have enough brain space to be able to do all of the other stuff. not just driving the car very, very quickly and having the computers work it out, particularly, during the early part of the season. And because of that, I think that, you don't lose that talent overnight. And I think that Hamilton, bearing in mind that he can barely contain his smiles, they look ecstatic at Ferrari. I don't think they could pull a poker face if they wanted to. I think it's going to be Hamilton on pole, and I think he's going to take the win as well. He's not had the best of records at Melbourne, but in the twilight of your career is a great time for a turnaround. Then I'm going to go Max Verstappen, because I have to say I can't disagree with Tom there. Max Verstappen does, he'd ride a lawnmower fastest if you asked him to, put him in anything. And like I say, he's got the brain space to just figure out how it works, figure out how to get the speed out of it. And it doesn't matter what it's got in it or where its deficiencies are. He is good enough to drive around it. And like I say, again, Ferrari barely containing their smiles at every single point that we've seen them. And I think it's going to be Charles Leclerc finishing out that third place on the podium. And my bold prediction, that isn't really that bold, let's be honest, is that Aston Martin, despite, like I say, having so many things going in their favour about how they might be able to hit the ground running with this regulation change after everything that they've been through, I think will be last behind newcomers Cadillac come the end of the Australian GP weekend in this constructors.
He's already gone ahead and thrown his bold prediction in there. How about you throw yours as well, Thomas? And then I'll give my predictions.
Fine, yeah. So, I mean, I don't think that's that bold, to be honest. Aston being at the back. But yeah, fantastic job from Cadillac, though. I've not had a chance to say it on the podcast, but yeah, I think they've done a fantastic job. But who would have thought after last year I would be saying that my bold prediction will be Pierre Gasly will be competitive with the top three and will finish in the top six. I'd have never thought I'd have said that after last year.
I mean, we all know how much you adore Pierre Gasly. On
French in general.
The French in general, of course, which also explains your positions on Alpine. But I nearly said Pierre Gasly P4 for my bold prediction. But I thought that was being too bold. And then I went back and looked at Alpine's performance. And of course, they do appear to have shut up a bit. And my predictions very much rely on the chaos that sometimes comes along with Australia. And I'm starting off with my pole position of Charles Leclerc. Ferrari are obviously, they do appear to have one lap pace in Bahrain. It did look quite promising. And the man knows how to put it on pole. However, whether he wins it or not from pole is another matter. So I'm going to be bold and brave and say that I have also drunk the Kool-Aid. Lewis Hamilton will be the winner of the Australian Grand Prix. Might not have won in 10 years, but it would be such a good vibe, and I would, probably die, and we would have to get a new Grid Talk host for the rest of the 2026 season. And that will be followed by George Russell in second in the Mercedes, and Oscar Piastri, a little bit of vindication for last year, is going to be the lead McLaren in third place on that final step of the podium. And if that's not bold enough for you, my bold prediction is at least 8 cars will not finish the race. 2014, Australia had 8 retirees and Jules Bianchi was non-classified and 8 laps down. Are we going into a similar situation? Possibly. Who knows? But just imagine it. And Tom, before you plug anything you want to say before that?
Yeah, I would just love to say that this is how refreshing is this. Everyone is saying about the doom and gloom of these regulations, but us three people here, all very similar fandoms, very similar apart from Owain and his crazy obsession with Audi. But we're all, we've all got we like similar drivers, we like similar teams. We've all got similar views on Formula One with a similar level of fandom of the sport. We've all come up with completely different predictions. Nobody knows what's going to happen. How refreshing is it to not be just picking a selection of Norris, Piastri and Verstappen for our top three? And this is coming from a McLaren fan. So, roll on the season. That's great. And yeah, look out for the monkey seat. We will be doing a podcast this week, apparently. And rumour has it that Carl will have no clothes on for that podcast. So tune in for that and all the explanations as to why that is coming soon.
Definitely do, and keep an eye out for them actually going live and maybe telling someone that they go live for once. But yeah, Owain, anything you want to plug at this opportunity?
I'd like to plug the rest of our predictions that you will be hearing coming up over the next, well, was it 24 races? If you'd like to hear all of the rest of our hosts' predictions of, how this season is going to go, who's going to manage things best, then you will have to tune into our Grid Talk social channels. They're available at Grid Talk UK on all the social media platforms with the @ and that is the only place that you can find out what Louis thinks, or what Tom Downey thinks, or what Joward thinks. So yeah, absolutely tune in to make sure you go and find our social channels and give them a follow. That's at Grid Talk UK on all the social media platforms with the @
Please do. And you can find me on Instagram whilst you're looking at our Grid Talk socials at Ruby Rose Price. And Grid Talk is available on YouTube as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Casts. Just search Formula One Grid Talk for our back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to the race results. Thank you to Jared Bradley and Holly Eagle for supporting us on Patreon. If you want to support the show further, why not sign up to our Patreon for exclusive content? And also make sure you subscribe to be first to know when each new episode is released. We'll be back soon with plenty more F1 content, and of course, the Australian Grand Prix will soon be underway at the ungodly hour of 4 a.m. over here in the UK. I've got to get the complaints in at least once before this podcast finishes. But thank you very much for listening to the Grid Talk podcast, and goodbye.